So first off, my name is Matt Baum, CEO and co-founder of RevOps Co-op. We have a community of about 8,500 plus folks who are passionate about revenue operations. Community is free to join. I think David or Dylan will drop the link to the community in the chat for anyone who may not be a member yet. And today we are going to be talking with a couple of kind of experts on how RevOps can exceed the expectations of leadership. And specifically, I've got a 2x CEO, a 3x CRO, and a director of RevOps. It's like one of those. It's like the start of a joke. Like, what do you get when a CEO, CRO, and a director of RevOps walk into a bar? This is what you get, everybody.
A good business.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you get a well-oiled revenue machine, a market machine.
Efficient one. You get tons of opinions, that's for sure.
Yeah. So a spreadsheet, I like that. Yeah. Or a HubSpot workflow. All right. So, but yeah, we're going to be talking about how RevOps can exceed the expectation of leadership. And I think, I guess a couple of reasons why I believe this topic is timely. One, I'm sure everyone on this call, I know I have experienced it myself in revenue operations. Folks are like, hey, can you pull this report for me real quick? Can you, update this field in Salesforce real quick? You kind of get a lot of these kind of little tactical requests, and whether that's perception versus reality or actuality, a lot of those kind of day-to-day kind of super tactical things, folks in RevOps are definitely a strategic asset. So we want to talk about how you can move from, kind of tactical to strategic. Again, a lot of different kind of views that we can have on that. But then the other thing is, if you think about revenue operations, there's not necessarily a set of universal KPIs, like if you're Isaac and you're, in charge of revenue at a company, like new business, sales goals, sales targets, kind of easy to measure outcomes there. RevOps a little bit differently. So we're going to talk about some examples of how each of the folks here, and some ways that you can also kind of develop some KPIs, things to kind of help kind of track against to determine, hey, what am I kind of driving towards? What outcomes am I looking to influence? And how can I exceed those expectations? And then last but not least, also just how can RevOps, again, position themselves or yourselves, I guess, inside an organization to have a seat at the table for every go-to-market strategy discussion. Again, move from tactical to strategic. And so those are the things we're going to be talking about today. With me, I've got a couple of experts I'm going to introduce quick. So I've got Ido Gavar, who is the CEO and co-founder of Sweep. He's also a 2x kind of CEO and has a lot of great experience at Wix as well. So Ido, my friend, I guess add anything to that introduction that you'd like. Also curious on kind of where you're kind of physically located right now, so the folks know. And then give us one interesting kind of personal fact about you that's completely not work related, to a little bit of fun.
So I'm based in New York right now from our office on 56th Street. It's beautiful right now in New York, so can't complain. Although usually I have tons of reasons to complain over the weather here. And personal fun fact, I was a scuba diving instructor in the Galapagos for almost 15 months.
That's awesome. That is awesome. All right. And along with Ido, I've got Elizabeth Russo, who is the Director of Revenue Operations at Elios Health. Elizabeth, I guess same question for you. Where are you currently located? And give us one kind of personal fact that is more interesting than being a scuba instructor in the Galapagos for.
I do not have a fun fact that's more interesting than that. So I'm Elizabeth Russo. I'm based in Watertown, Massachusetts, so 20 minutes outside of the city of Boston, give or take, depending on traffic. And before I kind of dove headfirst into the health tech world, I actually worked in book publishing, and that was spurred on because I'm a huge reader and I love to set a reading goal. This year it's 52, a book a week, and I'm currently tracking 6 books ahead of schedule.
That is impressive. How long does a do you have any like length requirement on books in order to?
No, but the way I track it does, this is like, again, classic, feeds in well with this discussion. I do get a page summary at the end of the year, and I want to say in 2022 is something around like 20,000 pages.
Okay, that's impressive. That is very impressive. All right, so in addition to Ido and Elizabeth, I've got Isaac Bunick, who is the CRO at Rossum. Isaac, I guess same question for you. Physically, where are you at today, my friend? Since apparently last week you were in the Midwest, I don't think you are anymore. And then, yeah, one fun fact that's more interesting than, again, being a scuba diver in the Galapagos or reading a book a week.
Sure. So first of all, I'm the former CRO of Rossum.
Okay.
But I'm based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Today I'm in Miami blowing off some steam. Fun fact is I don't do anything fun, but no, just kidding around. I'm actually a calisthenics practitioner, and I'm actually here competing this week, which was like kind of like extreme movements without any weights. You guys are familiar with it. So yeah, that's what I do for fun.
That's
What's
awesome.
your favorite movement?
Human flag.
That's hard.
Especially in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
A good party trick.
I've been doing it all week here in Collins Avenue. It's hilarious. People's reactions. Just love it.
That's awesome. Yeah, all the folks out there that do calisthenics are yeah, it blows my mind every single time I see. So you definitely would turn my head once or twice if I saw you doing that in the middle of the street in Miami. So that's awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Isaac. And yeah, I think, maybe the place to start, and this maybe this first question is for you, is talk a little bit about like the CEO's perspective, and I'll bring up, I know we've got a kind of a slide on this too, of just the perception versus reality of this like tactical versus strategic question, right? Like, you're obviously leading a company right now. The product itself is also built for people in RevOps, and I could argue that your product or solution also kind of helps folks do a lot of things that can help move them from tactical to strategic. But talk a little bit about this perception versus reality issue and what it means to you as a CEO.
So just first of all, before we dive into tactical versus strategic, I think that management expectations from RevOps are also confusing for management. RevOps is a relatively new role, new discipline in the organization that is not as clear as sales or product or CS. All of a sudden you have this group of people that are responsible, multidisciplinary. They take responsibility of everything from sales to financing. And it also combines two very different elements of business understanding and system understanding, right? It's like the world becomes very complicated if you kind of like connect these two vectors into one team. So it's also very confusing for management to actually know what they can expect from a RevOps. So actually my first advice on the matter for anyone who's doing RevOps would probably be to understand what is expected of you. It's never a clean slate. There's always like past experience and things that are expected from the team, and it may really surprise you on what management is looking at. And I've seen it, like we're seeing it at Sweep. Just speaking to different organizations, we're seeing the different way that management, regardless of the size of the company, are looking at their RevOps team. Going into the discussion specifically of tactical versus strategic, it's really not on anyone. Like no one at leadership at any company cares about whether a role is tactical or strategic. For most managements, it's completely meaningless. Operation is something that, in a perfect world, you probably wouldn't need operation. It's actually, I'm quoting now the COO of Wix that said that in a perfect world, no one would need it. I mean, it's probably accurate, but we're living in an imperfect world where you need to solve problems and remove blockers all the time. So I would say that the difference between a tactical RevOps versus a strategic RevOps would probably be on the ability of the RevOps team to go through the backlog and go through things that are more like the admin side of the job relatively quickly. It's obvious that if you're spending, we spoke with Elizabeth before the webinar started, and we dragged her from doing a HubSpot flow.
Mm-hmm.
And if if she's going to spend, I don't know how many hours or how many days on a HubSpot flow, that's like, you have to do that. There's no way around it. But obviously it keeps you away from having a seat at the table in making a decision. So finding ways to optimize that, and there's we can get into a couple of hours discussion on just how to do that, how to maintain that part of the business as simple as possible, for you to go through your checklist. That would be like the number one thing that I think can elevate a good RevOps from tactical to strategic. I would also say that the RevOps position, almost by definition, is really welcomed and has like an open door to anyone in management with any kind of recommendation. I have yet to see a CEO or a CRO where someone from RevOps who comes with the data that that is exposed and visible to the RevOps team, that comes to him with a suggestion and is just being blocked away. It usually goes directly to the top pile of suggestions. That's at least my experience.
Yeah. So it seems like what you said, Ido, was one, the role of RevOps, I think by default is one that call it management and executive team is certainly open to like any recommendations, insights that team can bring to the table. But you kind of need to start with, and I saw some of this in the chat too from what people are mentioning, is like, why am I here? Like, what's my charter? What are the outcomes that I'm looking to drive, impact? What are my goals? What are my objectives? What are my OKRs? Whatever that might be, right? What are those things that I'm looking to do? Elizabeth, from your perspective, obviously being in a RevOps role and having some experience at a couple of different companies, like how, whether it was at Elios or any other company that you've been at, like when you first got into your new role, or even if you're starting from a place that doesn't have definition, maybe there's a lack of definition. Like, what are some of those things that you've done to say, like, okay, here's what you can expect from me. Like, here are the things that I'm going to be doing. Here are the outcomes that I'm going to be looking to drive. Like, here's the impact that I'm going to have.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for context, I really honed the beginning of my ops career at a large enterprise sized company. There was siloed marketing, sales, customer success, ops. I was on the sales side. And so that really kind of influenced my upbringing. We had over 300 salespeople. And I left that to go to startups where in both cases, my last company and this one, I was the first kind of commercial anything operations hire. So my current company, we're Series A, and when I joined, we were around 70 employees. There was nothing built out. So for me, it's kind of a little bit what Hannah was just saying in the chat around really doing an education circuit about what to expect and then interviewing people about where they thought we were at, where the biggest gaps were, where visibility was just flat out missing, and doing that like my first week, taking that. And again, this was going on in the chat, building a roadmap, saying, okay, based on what you guys said, this is where I see me slotting in immediately in the work that I need to do. And that's worked really well for me because it also can help, prioritize. Because that's the thing, alluded to it. So much of this job, and everybody on this chat knows, so much of the job is keep the lights on work. It's work that you just have to do to make sure that business keeps going. But that's not always the fun stuff. Usually it's not the fun stuff. And so prioritizing that against the more strategic initiatives can always be a challenge. And I've always found it challenging, especially in a situation where I'm the only hire, I'm the only ops person. So it's been different. It's been different based on where I work, where I've slotted in. If I was going back to an enterprise sized company right now, I'd do it completely differently. So for me, it's really meeting your organization where they're at, and starting there.
Yeah. So do
There's-
some initial discovery.
So that's there's something really interesting that comes up, I think, in the chat and also with what Elizabeth said. There's like this. It seems that there are two ways for RevOps in general to have like to become mission critical within their organization, and it's like there are two very polar approaches to it. One is visibility and transparency. And I'm reading what Stephanie wrote here in the chat of we went with full transparency of roadmap and weekly workload publicly, which is pretty amazing. And on the other end, we're also seeing a lot of RevOps that are becoming mission critical to the organization because of the opposite, because of the fact that they kind of like keep everything siloed, black box, everything is under control, but we're the only ones who know what's happening here. And it turns them, at least from their perspective, into more strategic for the organization or irreplaceable. I don't know, I'm very curious to hear like what Isaac thinks about it. I'm sure that he saw like both sides of that equation.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Isaac? And being on the especially on the revenue executive side, right? Like you brought up two kind of polar opposites in terms of full transparency versus kind of keeping things kind of close to the vest. But then also in interacting with a bunch of RevOps teams, what model maybe has worked the best or been most effective that you've seen, and what are some good places to start? I know Elizabeth has shared some herself. We've seen some in the chat, but what are some thoughts from your perspective?
I'm not so sure why there's so much confusion over what's the charter of the RevOps team. So I'll give you the answer, and everyone on this call can use it for their executive team. Your charter is quite simple. You need to drive visibility, measurability, and predictability in the business, and clear ownership across the organization in each and every function. As the RevOps team, you must have the answers to the business. It's not about what you do on the back end, it's what you talk about on the front end. Okay, and your KPI is your ability to raise the baseline performance of the business over time in any point of the system through continuous process engineering and understanding of each and every function in the organization as it grows. So really, if you want to talk about how to become the best RevOps person in the market, I think the answer is really simple. And if you want to get a seat at the table, as everybody keeps asking me, how do I get a seat at the table? The answer is really, really simple, okay? Because you understand all the levers of the business, and your ability to understand those levers is in your control, this is really where you need to invest your time as you grow. So to really be the best RevOps person, spend time in sales, spend time in biz dev, spend time in customer success, spend time in support. If you can hold those positions as a part of your career, even better. Because the Salesforce stuff, the back-end stuff is absolutely meaningless when it's all the front-end stuff that really helps you shine in the organization. So this is kind of my 2 cents on the RevOps role. Yeah. I started with RevOps and I became the front end because my entire discussion throughout the last 15 years was purely about, the business and its levers.
Yeah, and I know, and that makes a lot of sense. I know for me, when I was previously kind of leading BizOps at a growing startup called Ally.io, I was not only BizOps, but I was also RevOps, at least to start.
and Ally.io is building OKR software. So naturally we use OKRs as our kind of goal setting framework. But yeah, I basically did kind of what you described, Isaac, where, I looked at, okay, like we're setting these company goals, objectives, right? Revenue targets, expansion targets, new business targets, like all this stuff. And whether it was BizOps or RevOps related, then I was like, okay, what are the things that I can do to impact each of those things, right? Is there process adherence? Are there workflow improvements? Are there things that we can do that will enable our customer success team to better identify upsell, customers with upsell potential, so that we can hand those off to our sales team? Are there, kind of process things we can do on the front end to make it easier for our sales team to identify free trials with the highest likelihood of, converting and, being from larger accounts, right? Like, how can I unblock some of those things? And kind of goes, starts at the very top of funnel on, maybe the marketing side, and all the way down to, like I said, post sales. And that's the unique position, I think, that RevOps is in, where you're sitting there at that intersection of all of those things, and no one else really has a view into how all of those things play together, except for
Right, but I challenge every person in RevOps today to try to take ownership in the different roles of the organization, because until you become the consultant before they go to consultants, you're not really the best. If the company needs to turn to external people to get advice on how to operate, okay, you should look at yourself and say, I don't know enough. I don't understand enough about the function in the organization. And so they have to go out external initially before talking to me. One of the unique advantages that I had as somebody who started out in RevOps, eventually became the CRO, is I held every role in the company, including finance to some extent, and operations and all those kind of things. So when people would advise with me on how to build out their go-to-market machine, they didn't need to go out externally so quickly. The first round of expertise they were able to get internally, and that's how you're constantly getting a seat at the table. From the top executive team to the board, right? This is kind of how things work. So I think you are shortchanging yourself professionally if you stay only in that function of RevOps from the technical point of view, and you're not moving to the more strategic side and getting on the operational side of things. So we have to kind of minimize how much that Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever plays a role in our lives, and increase how much sales, success, support, finance plays in our lives. This is kind of like how you got to do it if you really want to move up the ladder quickly and increase in importance to the organization.
So I just want to add into something that Isaac said. I actually think one of the best things I did in my career, and I had no idea at the time, was I spent 2 years on a pricing strategy team, and I spent 2 years on an analytics team, just because the opportunities kind of presented themselves to me. And through both of those roles, I realized, one, I don't want to do pricing strategy, and two, I don't want to sit and do analytics all day long. But they gave me such a better understanding of the business that I wouldn't take that back for anything. Specifically with pricing strategy, I was up until that point really focused on sales operations because RevOps hadn't shown up. My company wasn't structured that way. But being on pricing strategy really opened my eyes to the world of like renewals and customer success and just this whole other part of the business that I hadn't had exposure to, that I think went on to serve me well when I decided to move into a more RevOps focused role. So at the time, they stressed me out a little bit. I didn't love the work, but my foundation was so much better for it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And if you think about, I always use the analogy of RevOps being, like the utility player in baseball, right? You got to, one day you're second base, the next day you're left field, right field. And I think the diversity of background and experience helps, especially helps in a RevOps type of role. And so Jenny, one of the things that Jenny asked in the chat was some specific examples of, Isaac, you brought up this idea of levers of the business, how RevOps can impact that. I know, again, for me, I looked at when I was in my BizOps role, like, hey, what are the company level objectives, right? What are the things we're trying to do as a growing startup? tons of focus was obviously on revenue growth, and specifically through new business and expansion revenue. So we had quarterly new business targets and expansion revenue targets. And I looked at what are the things that might be in our backlog, our quarterly roadmap, what are projects or even new initiatives that aren't out there yet to that we can do to help kind of drive new business or expansion revenue, right? If it's expansion revenue, are there things that we can be doing to help raise the flag of like proactively, like, hey, these customers look like they might be ripe or prime kind of for expansion? Is there something to do with like the customer success to sales handoff on the expansion side? You know, again, with new business, it might be more marketing to sales focus. One of the things for us was kind of free trials and making sure that the sales team was aware of every free trial that we had come in the door that met certain thresholds for account size and was on our target account list, right? So how can we proactively identify those things, you know, raise them to the sales team so they don't have to dig, right? Efficiency, optimization, improvements like that. Those are some of the things that we looked at. But Isaac, I don't know if you have anything to add on like what are some of those specific levers? I know you're putting them some in here on like pipeline, biz dev, obviously revenue. Any specifics that you want to mention that you've seen RevOps?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really simple. Like you or hopefully you, but your CFO, your COO, whoever it is in the company is producing a business model, right? And that business model is taking a set of assumptions. Those assumptions, top down or bottom up, are based on people and productivity across different parts of the organization, right? For BD, pipeline per BDR, for AE, you know, quota per AE, et cetera, and you just go down the list of all the nuances up and through customer success and support. And those things are effectively the levers, right? And if you can improve the productivity of each input in the organization, each person in the organization, then you're effectively increasing the efficiency of the organization and the predictability. So this is kind of like the game that you play. So you must understand, you know, those drivers as the leading operator to make those drivers improve over time. This is the RevOps, you know, function in the end of the day.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, I guess Elizabeth, in your role as a director of RevOps now, have you gone through that exercise, or like, I guess, do you guys have KPIs, OKRs, like whatever it is? Have you kind of mapped like initiatives to those things? Like, what does that look like for you firsthand?
Yeah, so I inherited a buyer's journey playbook upon joining this organization, and your question's kind of timely because I've been here for around 6 months now. Our business has changed. We've moved into more of an enterprise size cycle, which means the buyer's journey doesn't make a ton of sense right now. So a big thing I'm going through this quarter is that mapping. And you know, I know we're on with sweep. It fits in really well with sweep in this moment because my buyer's journey is going to eventually become my sweep funnel. So, you know, I've done it at a few different organizations. This is the first time I've really had to tackle it net new. I was about to drop a link into the chat. I really like, you know, the winning by design kind of bow tie model to picture it. If you need like an image to look at where the conversions are and how to think about them, both from sales over to renewal, I like the bow tie. So, you know, it's a big project. I'm starting it a little too late in the quarter to be a Q2 goal, but all the companies I've worked at, we've always set KRs. I usually, as the RevOps person, wait to kind of get an idea where sales, marketing, and customer success's heads are at when they set their OKRs. And, you know, they hear me say a lot, please don't set anything that we don't have infrastructure to measure, because that happens a lot of times. You know, parts of the business want to measure something that we just can't do yet. So I really try to partner with them as they set theirs and then build mine off of theirs as well.
Yeah. That's great. And I guess, Ido, from your perspective, like, you know, as a person leading the company, I guess, what are some of whether it's at Sweep or obviously you're dealing with a lot of RevOps folks as customers as well, what are the things that I guess you're looking to your RevOps team to drive or impact? What are some of whether KPIs or levers, whatever we want to call them? And what have you seen maybe from some of your customers as well?
So I would actually start with a negative example. A lot of the time we're seeing organization where the business side and the system side become decoupled, right? Whether it can be completely separated into two different teams, they could be reporting to different people. But once that happens, I think that RevOps kind of like are in a very risky zone of losing touch with the systems and with what is actually implemented. And then like what we're seeing with a lot of organizations is that the business side of RevOps all of a sudden starts losing its relevancy within the organization. Because if, for example, the go-to-market teams know that in order to get something done, they need to go to the system side, and they can skip the business side, or the business side might just give them some advice that is not relevant because they don't really know the complexity of what it means to change things around on Salesforce or on HubSpot, as an example. So that's like a huge risk in order for the RevOps team to maintain its impact. I think that where I've seen like really good examples of companies that RevOps are making a huge difference was seeing a company that is very used to working in a very online self-service environment, right? So the RevOps function at Wix started when Wix was already generating about $1 billion a year. So you have management and the whole organization that is kind of like conditioned into making very quick changes and being very adaptive. And all of a sudden you're adding Salesforce and go-to-market motions that are by default much slower than what the organization is used to. And just seeing the way that that the RevOps team over there adapted itself to work with the developers that are building the online funnels in order to build also the offline funnels and to have the customer journeys to mimic what is happening online. That was a great example for me.
Yeah, that makes makes tons of sense. And so I know, we've talked about kind of setting the expectations, the things that we're going to drive. I think heard a little bit about notion of process visibility, transparency for the things that you're working on, also keeping things close to the chest. I guess one of the things I want to talk about next is this notion of collaboration and also like visibility, like data visibility and kind of the proactive nature. I think you mentioned it at the beginning of like RevOps folks like proactively like bringing those insights to you, and how like the team is uniquely positioned to do that in an objective way, right? Because they're not just coming at it from like a sales perspective or a marketing perspective or a CS perspective. So I guess talk a little bit about that notion of data visibility and objectiveness that RevOps brings to the table, and how folks can kind of proactively bring those insights to the table and the impact that it can have for folks on the executive team.
So one of the most frustrating experiences that I have or had was whenever I was asking for an explanation on the process and what is actually implemented on Salesforce. I would get an answer of let's talk in a week from now, and we'll prepare a presentation and we'll show you what's actually implemented. The other side of this coin is that when you're actually planning something and you're building it in Visio or in a PowerPoint, and then the RevOps team is tasked with actually implementing that process, there are also things that are lost in translation. So that was a big thing for me, and also like a big part of what we're trying to solve now. I think that actually Elizabeth is right now in exactly a position where she's planning something and she's able to do that in collaboration with her management team on something that is live and dynamic, and you can actually see the go-to-market motions that are going to be implemented exactly on Salesforce, and that creates a certain level of buying and a certain level of planning that I think was really missing. I think that only like very large organizations that have a lot of time into planning and into implementation could actually be able to get into this fine details. And it's something that, at least in the past, I found that was really missing from the RevOps world.
Yeah. Yeah, Elizabeth, you want to share more on those kind of specific examples? I think they probably relate to something like this, right? In terms of like process visibility. And, again, the more that I think the main thing I heard, was, again, this notion of collaboration, right? Like invite people in, whether it's to the systems, whether it's to the data, like whatever it is you're working on, like don't make it like, I don't know, don't make it a, like I do this work and present it to you, make it a thing that we do together, right? We drive this together. So yeah, Elizabeth, you want to talk more about your specific example?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of laughed when I was originally talking to the sweep guys and Danny and all that, because they were like, look, you'll use this and you'll show your stakeholders, what you're doing in this view. I bet you will. And they kind of told me that. And I was like, I don't know. Like I was a little skeptical of it, to be honest. And one of the first things we did when we moved systems into Salesforce was redesign our lead flow process, because we didn't have a lead flow process. So leads were coming in, nothing was happening. And I quite literally use this view all the time now to explain to people what's going on, the handoffs and the conversions and like what we're asking the various teams to do. I pull these funnels up a lot now to walk people through. And as we kind of overhaul our opportunity management process and in that buyer's journey, my plan is fully to do a lot of it in this view where we can walk through the high level buyer's journey stuff and the requirements and all of that. And, they can watch me do it live because it takes 2 seconds and it's easy to do. So, yeah, I was fully skeptical. About using sweep in this way, but it turned out to be really useful. And for people who aren't technical, because they don't need to be, the visual really worked well. And frankly, I didn't want to build out a Visio. I had no interest in building out a Visio just to explain something to somebody, which is probably me being lazy. So it's nice to be able to have a view where you can kind of build at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's you being efficient, not lazy.
Yeah. Optimizing myself.
Yeah, but yeah, and I think, I don't know, like as I hear what you're mentioning, Elizabeth, and too, is like, this notion of, again, like tactical to strategic is kind of up to you in RevOps to define, right? A tactical example might just be doing the work, doing what people ask, no questions asked, right? A strategic way might be doing that same work, but collaborating with your stakeholders, presenting the information, actually doing the work together to drive some of those outcomes. The other thing I guess that we talked about was, I guess there's obviously like process visibility, systems visibility, but also data visibility. And again, this notion of presenting objective data. We brought this up. Isaac shared a bunch of examples in the chat of different models, levers, data points that folks can impact. But I think, again, RevOps is uniquely positioned to see the entire go-to-market engine and to bring those insights forward. So I guess, Elizabeth, do you have any examples on the data side that you can share on, kind of identifying things and like insights, like data storytelling, bringing that to the table proactively for the leadership team that actually kind of drove outcomes and had a big impact?
Yeah, I mean, so at my last company, when I joined, I realized everybody meant something different when they said bookings. And that, very quickly marketing was using TCV to measure their impact. Sales was using ARR, and the two things were telling a very, very different story. So right off the bat for me, kind of mentioned this in the chat, I got everybody aligned on the definitions, documented the definitions, and then established a source of truth and said, like, look, for all reporting purposes, marketing, friends, I know you're going to go off and build your reports and tell your story. And I know that I want to be present in part of that, but you won't always let me be for whatever reason. At the very least, please use this. Please use this as your number. This is what we can all align to as a bookings number. Because that's huge. They were measuring their pipeline impact in a very, very different way than sales was perceiving their pipeline impact. And that's just one example of kind of the data being jumbled, the definitions being jumbled, and people not fully knowing where the source of truth is.
Yep. And Ito, I guess, you have any examples of being on the receiving end of, kind of insights or anything kind of proactively being erased for you from your RevOps team here that is worth sharing as a good example? And I guess same for you, Isaac, of like, being on the, in your kind of CRO seat. What are some things that your RevOps team has done that's been effective in, again, proactively identifying some of those issues, things that need to be challenged or up for consideration?
I'll give one where we had the RevOps team creating segmentation into our funnel in a way that we didn't think of, and it allowed us to catch a lot of lost opportunities that were kind of like just lost in the process. And they were able to, it's not that they were able, they just did it. They were able to color them under a specific status in the system, and then to create a whole new cadence that is targeting specifically that segment. And it generated like a lot of revenue in times that we really needed it.
Yeah. Any examples on your side, Isaac?
Yeah, I have some big examples. In general, RevOps helped dramatically in understanding how to set expectations for the org. So like, for example, when you're kicking off the year as a revenue officer, you need to understand what's the expectations of business development rep, of an account executive, of a customer success manager, and so on and so forth. They are in a unique position to tell you what those expectations should be. If I'm asking AEs to generate 1.5 million each, is that even a realistic outcome, and why? Same from my CS, account management, and so on and so forth. So I think they can help dramatically in looking in retrospect of what the business has done, what it can do, and putting that KPI in place for different parts of the organization.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense. And Jenny asked a question, and there's another question on kind of how RevOps can position themselves as a source of truth. And Jenny asked to how, when you bring insights forward, like maybe the ones that you mentioned, Ito, that have historically either been omitted or, not considered, things that might be new. How can you and RevOps kind of, that Jenny mentioned, like gently guide the organization to the transition, but how can you, help get folks over the hump, right? I think there can be a natural, maybe defense mechanism that comes up of like someone's presenting, some new information, but like, we've been here, like, oh, we should have seen this, like, it's not like it's wrong, or, oh, like, where'd you pull the data from, or, oh, that's not how we look at things. Like, I don't know, maybe Elizabeth, sounds like maybe you went through some of this, with like the bookings example that you gave, but any advice on like how do you guide people through that journey? How do you identify maybe what some of those objections would be and have good answers for them? How do you make sure that everyone knows that you are coming at this from an objective point of view?
Generally speaking, I'm not the most gentle, just personality wise, but like an example that comes to mind is I worked for a few years back. The company I was working for a certain segment did per user pricing, but companies could add users at any point, and I pretty quickly realized that we weren't truing that up in any way. to the tune of $12 million. So like that's a dramatic example, and it was kind of easy to share why that was important and why we needed to make a change, because it was directly tied to revenue. But there was the risk of upsetting all of our customers who historically got a really good deal because we didn't go back and charge them for the people they were adding. So the next part of the conversation really ended up being around, how do we message this? How do we communicate this? How do we change it? So that's where the gentle hand, I think, had to come in. So initially, internally, it was shocking that we were not doing this thing. And it was really easy to understand why we needed to go do it, but the mechanism for going to do it had to be a lot more well thought out and well planned.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's not necessarily as simple as saying, oh, we were doing things this way, now we're going to do them this way, and that'll generate $12 million of
12 million.
more revenue. And I think from an ops perspective of just like following that thought process through, right, and understanding that, if we're going to charge customers an extra $12 million, like someone's got to tell them, to expect this. Also, someone has to bill them, invoice them. We have to collect payment. Is this going to cause people to churn, right? There's a bunch of other things that are naturally come up. And from an ops perspective, if you can, again, follow that narrative through and understand that those are call it the repercussions, the impact of the recommendation or the insight that you're bringing to the table, that's an important thing to have. So yeah, that makes sense.
I have a good example for establishing yourself as a source of truth.
Yeah.
So first of all, I mean, just from like the fact that you need to establish yourself as a source of truth means that there's like some problem in the organization, or that there's like some lack of faith regarding what is the source of truth. And what I've seen working really well, we've seen it with one of our customers very recently, was someone from RevOps who just felt that their data is not compelling enough for the company to actually believe in. So what she did, she went one layer below the reports, and it was like a whole discussion around the activity of the SDR team on MQLs. Okay, that was the context. And it was kind of like a he said, she said situation. And she just came with a report of like, here are the MQLs, here's what actually happened. And she just went in a very long meeting, one by one, and just like driving her point through the raw data, and then saying, okay, now instead of doing all of that manually, here's the report, here's the dashboard that reflects all of that reality to the entire organization. And it seemed initially when she was doing that meeting as if it's like a very non-efficient meeting, right? It was a 2 hours meeting, and who can stand those meetings? But eventually it was 2 hours and done. That's it.
Yeah.
I want to add to that. I think building on a single source of truth in the organization from the RevOps perspective is a selling game. There's a lot of politics behind it as well, because you're hurting people's feelings along the way. So usually what I would have my team do is a little bit of a bait and switch. It's along the lines of what Ido is alluding to. You're giving them insights that they don't really look into themselves, gaining trust on what you can bring to the table, and then you're able to sell more as far as the more obvious metrics and the single source of truths behind them. I don't think it's an easy game. I don't think it's as easy as just saying, hey, but these numbers are right, my data is better, whatever. You're dealing with biases, you're dealing with personal agendas. There's a lot of like psychological aspects behind it. And so you really have to earn trust across the business for people to start aligning on your single source of truth.
Yeah.
And that's part of your responsibility as RevOps, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think it's I think the key word there is you become the established source of truth, right? Which means that it's not just one thing that you can do. And I know at least like for me, I think the thing I've heard from everybody here is again, like tie it, when you bring data or insights or stories to the table, like tie it back to not only why it's important for the business, but why it's important for each stakeholder, right? Each person that is there, whether it's a sales leader, whether it's the marketing leader, the CS leader, whoever it is, make sure it's clear like why it's important and relevant for them. And the other thing that I think you can do is you can also establish yourself as the source of truth outside of like those data and those insights that you bring to the table. And this is, I guess, one question maybe for you, Elizabeth, on the enablement side is like, create efficiency for the teams that you support, right? One way that you can build trust with your stakeholders, whether it's the head of sales, the head of marketing, the head of CS, is not just by bringing stories to the table that may say like, hey, the MQL to, qualified opportunity conversion rate is really crummy, marketing. We got to do better on kind of quality of leads, but what can you do to make the life of your marketing team and your marketing leader easier, right? Can you speed up, remove administrative work? Are there things that you can do there? So Elizabeth, I don't know how this resonates with you kind of sitting in the RevOps seat right now. And if you have any examples too, like maybe even things that are like low hanging fruit, like what might be some quick wins that people could look at today to help to create efficiency for the different teams that they support.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always central to my mind. Exactly what you were just talking about is something that I'm always thinking about. Because like, I got into this one because I'm a nerd and I like puzzles, but I really like making people's jobs better. Like that's why I like my job. I like to optimize, increase efficiency. I always tell specifically the salespeople I work with, like, I'm not in the business of requiring fields just to require fields. Like I hate making anything required. Like if something's about to be required, it's because somebody is asking about it or I'm asking about it, or it drives some insight that like we all as a business need to understand. So for me, like in being the only ops person, it's getting to know my reps, getting to know my marketing folks, getting to know my CSMs. And really, it goes back to what Isaac was saying, trying to understand their jobs, understand their day-to-day and what their work is like, so that when I make process recommendations or like broader strategy recommendations about how the teams work together, I can picture the impact that it's going to have on them and their day-to-day. And I think candidly, it's one of the things that I'm most proud about, is that I really try not to do things siloed off. I really try to think about the people that it impacts when I make any kind of like either operations, process, whatever decision.
Yeah, Ben in the chat just brought up this idea of empathy, and I think that's really it. And like we talked about collaboration, bringing people along for the ride. Even going back to the question of how can you establish yourself as a source of truth, or the subject of the talk today, right? How can you establish yourself as a strategic resource, right? It's not just like one thing, but it's a series of things. And especially the more you can do to just help the people that you support, whether that's eliminating administrative work from their workflows, making their jobs more efficient, then when you bring those insights to the table, there's already going to be trust in that relationship, right? You're not going to have some big hurdle that you need to get over. All of that stuff is kind of critically important. And I know we've got kind of a couple of other things on here. We're getting to kind of the end of time. So I guess Ido, Elizabeth, and Isaac, some of the other things we had in here on presenting your work, automation, but also just more generally, like any kind of closing thoughts or closing remarks on, again, this notion of moving from tactical to strategic, how RevOps can be this, kind of source of truth, established source of truth. Maybe we'll start with you. Like any last kind of closing remarks or things you want to share with the audience here?
So I really like the first comment that Isaac made on learning how to be the best at any position. Kind of like being the all-around player for the team. I think that also connects really well with the last comment around empathy, because the only way to really generate that empathy and to be authentic about it is if you know what people are going through.
Yeah. Elizabeth, what about you?
I think it's tough. It's something I struggle with every day. It's something I think about every day. One thing that it's worked really well for me is finding other people who do this job and talking to them about it. And you're doing that in the RevOps co-op, like having friends who have done it, like talk to your peers, see how they feel, see how they're doing it. Like for me, that's really helped. But I think it's something that we all have a tough time with and that we all have to think a lot about. So you're all doing a great job. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, keep it top of mind and find some friends. All right, and Isaac, what about you?
I think from kind of pointing out the strategic importance of the role, people need to highlight the macro of this situation in the technology business, especially. The technology ultimately gets commoditized very, very quickly. Two competing companies down the road will have the exact same thing technologically. The winner will be the one that can operate the best. And RevOps is the one that ensures that over time. And you start building when you're young and you become extremely proficient as you scale. And if you have that advantage, that operational advantage over your competition, you're going to win. And this is something that I think, maybe a lot of the C-level don't really understand. As the CRO, it's easy for me to sell because I own the most important metric of the company, which is, make the money. And so I could push agendas like that quickly. But I still think even if you're not the CRO, you can push the agenda quickly if you can highlight the macro of the situation long term. So take that to your executive staff as you're trying to explain the importance of your role top down versus bottoms up.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense. I think the things that I took away from all of you today are obviously like, RevOps needs to be in the weeds of things, but you need to bring yourself out of the weeds, out of the details, understand how those day-to-day things that you're doing fit into larger initiatives and projects that can influence those important metrics of the business: revenue, new business, expansion revenue, all of those things. And then, the other thing is like collaborate with your stakeholders, do things to build trust with them and empathize with them, right? Do things to help make their lives easier. And with that, I think you'll, find yourself earning that seat or moving into that seat probably without even knowing it, of being that trusted strategic advisor. So makes tons of sense. I want to say thank you to panelists, Ido, Elizabeth, Isaac. Thank you all very much for participating today, dropping some knowledge. I think the sweep team will be following up with everybody after this with the slides and probably some other information. And then again, this was recorded. We're going to put this up on our website along with a written summary in a week or two. So to everyone who attended, all the panelists, everybody, thank you all very, very much. But with that, I will let you all run. We're at the top of the hour. So take care, y'all. Have a good rest of your Tuesday, and we will hopefully see you at our next event. See ya.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you so much.
See y'all.